Discover the incredible power within. A transformative journey of honesty and discipline revealed. Emma Sullivan wiped the countertop of the diner with frenetic energy, her heart racing as she battled looming worries. The clattering of plates and the murmur of patrons melted into the background. Only the nagging thought of her son Jake remained, his struggles at school echoing in her mind like a warped melody. A single mother at 34, she juggled double shifts to keep food on the table and the light on in their small home. Jake, only 15, was drowning in the crushing weight of ridicule from bullies, all because of his obsession with science fiction. She felt the squeeze in her chest tighten, as if life's demands were pinning her down. Every day she served coffee and pie with a smile, but underneath, despair nipped at her heels. What if the only legacy she left for Jake was a life spent waiting tables, never taking bold steps? The thought was suffocating. Her own lack of formal education haunted her as the ache for something more grew louder, as if it were a siren calling to her. She stumbled upon a notice for an adult education program while cleaning the register and froze. The flicker of hope ignited something deep within, a chance to learn, to rise, not just for herself but for Jake. But who was she to think she could be more than a waitress? Before she could talk herself out of it, she enrolled in the classes. Each session presented its own labyrinth of challenges, and soon she discovered a surprising gift for teaching, mesmerized by the way words flowed from her when she spoke about the subjects she had once found so daunting. But her heart shuddered under the weight of skepticism from some fellow educators who eyed her as nothing more than a waitress without credentials. Each judgment stung, each sideways glance chipped away at her determination. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A chill raced through her as a scandal surfaced, poison spreading like wildfire through the education program. Powerful figures were accused of manipulating placements, an insidious web of favoritism weaving through the very system Emma had looked to for improvement. The idea that hard work could be undermined left her heart in tatters. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath her. Torn between her desire for progress and the moral imperative to confront this corrupt reality, she felt trapped in a vice, her dedication to Jake pulling at one side, her sense of integrity toward her new career on the other. The weight of unearned privilege hung over her like a storm cloud, pressing down, making her second-guess everything she felt drawn to. In the intimate silence of her thoughts, doubts began to manifest. What if her fight against the injustice jeopardized the little hope she had grasped? Would she lose sight of the brighter future she wished for Jake? As discontent simmered around her, allies began to emerge, allies who understood the pain of a system that favored the unfounded. Emma's voice shrank, but a flickering embers of resolve ignited, forcefully urging her towards confrontation. Each passing day brought more tension, whispers growing louder. With every class, the specter of exposure loomed. Just as she'd begun to find her footing, the threat felt even more immediate, as if the shadows were crawling closer, waiting for her misstep. Would her dedication and courage be enough to shatter the shackles of the system? Or would everything she was fighting for her family's honor, Jake's future, crumble under the weight of conspiracy? Time seemed to ripple around her, the stakes higher than ever as she stood on the precipice of her tumultuous transformation. The choice loomed large, immense and unyielding, pushing her closer to the edge. Emma sat on the edge of her bed, the muffled noise of the diner fading into an indistinct backdrop as she gazed at the stack of textbooks neatly arranged on her desk. Each spine whispered promises of new knowledge, new opportunities, and she realized these weren't just books. They were her escape route, a blueprint for survival in a world that seemed determined to push her back into the margins. But the recent scandal rocked her foundation, casting uncertainty over her path. With determination, she pulled open a textbook, fingers hovering over highlighted sections. The words on the page began to blur as panic teetered on the edge of her thoughts. Could she truly make a difference in a system that had exposed its deep-seated corruption? The very chains she hoped to break now felt as if they might ensnare her. She wrestled with increasing anxieties, a cacophony of what-ifs filling her head. What if the voices that questioned her were right? What if she failed Jake, failed herself? Suddenly, the phone buzzed, a lifeline and an anchor at once. It was Jake, a simple text that said, "I'm okay, Mom." Her heart swelled with gratitude, but also fear. Would her son be okay if she couldn't find the courage to challenge the establishment? A part of her yearned to share the struggle with him, to show him resilience in the face of adversity. But another part, born from her own insecurities, feared burdening him. Her resolve, however, was not yet extinguished. The fire flickered as she rifled through the papers on her desk, unearthing a flyer from a recent classmate meeting. The word support network stood out. Emma's heartbeat quickened. The idea of forming a coalition of like-minded classmates invigorated her. She would no longer face the tide of skepticism alone. Building a network might unveil hidden strengths in others while reinforcing her own. With clarity carving a path through her doubts, she grabbed her notebook and scribbled down potential allies. Fellow class attendees had whispered amongst themselves about their frustrations with the faculty. There was Marie, the graphic designer struggling to break free from a series of minimum-wage jobs, and Alex, whose talent in educational leadership was clouded by imposter syndrome. Each name evoked a semblance of hope, a collective strength waiting to be tapped. That evening, as she closed the diner, a sense of profound purpose crystallized within her. She felt invigorated not just as a waitress or a mother, but as a burgeoning advocate ready to challenge the patterns that stifled voices like hers. Emma decided to organize a meeting in the local library, where they could brainstorm how to confront the alleged corruption together. Would they be able to harness their shared experiences and confront the injustices plaguing their paths? The thought was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. The following day, standing before her class, Emma felt an unfamiliar warmth twinkling within her. As her peers filed in, she resolved to embody the competence and courage she sought to cultivate. Her hands trembled slightly, but she steadied herself, drawing from a deep well of resolve. The moment of vulnerability stirred within her a newfound authority, urging her to speak openly of the troubles they faced. "I believe we can support one another," she urged, gauging the reactions surrounding her. Hope twinkled in the eyes of her classmates, but it was the honor of presenting her truth that struck her most deeply. The plans began to take shape, conversations flourished, and alliances solidified in the shadow of her ambition. But as her collective grew from whispers to murmurs and began to gain the attention of the powers that be, the winds shifted ominously. Emma could feel pressure building. The danger of retribution hung heavily in the air. The day of their first meeting approached, uncertainty twisting in her stomach. Would they truly be able to confront the giants of bureaucracy? The room for doubt shrank as their numbers swelled, yet fear slithered alongside hope. Emma stood at the edge of her transformation, ready to either soar or fall, and she had no idea which awaited her. As the time ticks down toward their critical gathering, she could feel the stakes increasing, and real change a whisper away loomed like a phantom in the dark. What awaited her on the other side of confrontation? Emma steeled herself, prepared to discover the depths of her capacity for change in a world determined to keep her quiet. Emma paced the familiar confines of the diner, her body a bundle of nervous energy. The clinking of dishes and chatter of patrons felt distant as the enormity of the coming meeting pressed down on her. She could practically hear the clock ticking in tandem with her racing thoughts. Would she be able to navigate the treacherous waters ahead, or would the current drag her back into uncertainty? As the last customers trickled out, Emma wiped down the counter absently, her mind tangled in a web of doubts. There was strength in numbers, but what if her own voice faltered when it mattered most? She often questioned her worth, her capability to embody the change she so fervently wanted to see. Could she truly uplift others when she felt like she was still standing on shaky ground herself? The thought ran through her head again: who was she to lead? The self-doubt gnawed at her, Yet there was a flicker of defiance stirring beneath layers of fear. She straightened her posture, recalling her classmates' faces and trust. Their commitment to this cause gave her resolve. They believed in her. That's how Emma's fingers began to type. She crafted a message inviting everyone to the meeting, a subtle yet powerful reminder that each of them had a critical role to play in this course of action. When she arrived at the library that evening, the atmosphere shifted. A small group was already gathered, murmurs of anticipation filling the air. Emma felt an unfamiliar rush of adrenaline. This was her chance to galvanize unity, no longer merely a spectator, but a critical player. With a deep breath, she welcomed them, smiling as she glanced around the circle. Each face reflected struggles, aspirations, and the weight of their shared circumstances. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice steadying as she spoke. "We're here to discuss how we can confront the challenges we face in this system together. None of us has to navigate this alone." As she laid out the agenda, she was surprised by the emergence of new ideas and strategies, bouncing among her peers like kinetic energy. Her classmates shared experiences that rattled their ambitions unexpectedly, exposing vulnerabilities turned into a source of collective strength. Emma glued these threads together, feeling more assured with every word exchanged. But with that growing confidence came the looming shadow of fear. What if the powers that be retaliated? Emma could sense the rasp of anxiety creeping back in, but instead of succumbing to it, she channeled that energy into clarifying their goals. "Let us not let our fears silence us. We will stand together safely but firmly against the injustices that we have experienced." Over the next hour, the meeting morphed into something meaningful. They echoed their concerns, shared logistical strategies, and pooled resources to tackle the bureaucracy's overwhelming grip on their education. Emma facilitated this dialogue, allowing her underlying fears to solidify into a tenacious drive to succeed. At the conclusion, applause erupted, and Emma felt a wave of exhilaration wash over her. Together, they had forged a plan. Yet, just as quickly, the weight of reality settled back in. With each alliance they built, the scrutiny of authority would intensify. The sense of purpose she had cultivated now fused with the reality that they were challenging an entrenched system. Fear lurked closer than ever, mingling with her newfound determination. As she locked up the library doors, Emma knew this was just the beginning. Every conversation they had now risked exposure, each step forward potentially a stumble into danger. But she instinctively understood that now she stood not just for herself, nor primarily for her classmates. She stood for a broader change, and that responsibility transformed her fear into an unquenchable flame. What would happen when the inevitable confrontation with authority took place? Emma's grip tightened on the keys as she turned away from the library, the shadows stretching behind her like the unease of the journey ahead. The time had come for them to face the giants. Would her collective resolve stand unshakable in the face of threat? Emma steeled herself. This moment was their proving ground, and she was ready to wrestle with the truth, whatever the outcome. Emma walked away from the library, doubt and resolve coiling tightly in her chest. The evening air was cool, almost refreshing, yet every gust felt heavy with anticipation and uncertainty. She had ignited a flame within her peers, but now the question loomed. Would that spark sustain, or would it fizzle out under pressure? The gravity of their challenge nagged at her, merging with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. As she navigated the streets, each dim street lamp flickered like her wavering confidence. Emma's thoughts spiraled. Who would they encounter next? What could they lose? Yet, beneath those questions, a fierce determination began to unfurl. Empathy was a powerful tool, and Emma had witnessed its impact during their meeting. They weren't just voices encased in fear. They were a collective force. That thought ignited something profound within her, the realization that even in her vulnerability lay strength. The following days merged into a blur of strategizing, refining their agenda, and fostering connections. With every small victory, emails drafted, meetings scheduled, outreach efforts initiated, Emma absorbed lessons in leadership she had never anticipated. Sharing her plans provided clarity. Her once trembling nerves transformed into steady resolve. There was a turning point one evening when Emma met with a few classmates in a coffee shop. She noticed Jay, a particularly outspoken member, seemed reluctant to share ideas about approaching authority figures. As the conversation waned, Emma felt a charge of urgency shoot through her. Her fear of silence metamorphosed into a call for honesty. "Jay," she said gently, leaning in, "what is holding you back?" His eyes flickered with uncertainty, but as she maintained eye contact, he began to unravel the hesitation wrapped around his words. After listening to his perspective, she responded with empathy and shared her own doubts, which surprised them both. It was a revelation. Vulnerability could breed connection. Though he was cautious, the moment created solidarity. Emma took a mental note about the power of vulnerability when leading. It wasn't just about strategizing or organizing, it was about creating an environment where ideas could flourish despite fear. Encouraged, she transformed her approach, inviting her peers to share their challenges openly. Each meeting, they learned to confront their apprehensions, not individually but as an empowered group. It was profoundly liberating. Yet, the deeper she dove into her newfound role, the more the specter of confrontation loomed. Days paled in comparison to the growing tension tied to their objectives. One afternoon, while organizing materials for a presentation she would lead, Emma felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. What if I fail them? The thought danced cruelly across her mind, burrowing deeper than it should. But then she remembered Jay, and the distinct strength forged in their mutual honesty. She locked her fingers together, steadying her breath. Her focus sharpened. She had shifted from mere aspirations to actionable purpose. Each moment of self-doubt was an opportunity to cultivate her capacity for grit, and she was unwittingly sharpening her own leadership skills like a sword in the fire. With her thoughts aligned and her resolve reinvigorated, Emma planned her next steps. It was time to confront the giants, the school administration. To meet with honesty, determination, and courage despite the looming uncertainty felt both thrilling and terrifying. As she prepared her arguments, another thought struck her: what if they responded defensively? What if she had to choose between backing down or standing firm? The very essence of her growth was now entwined with the path ahead. It was time for a decisive moment. The choir of voices in her mind fell silent as she locked eyes with the reality of her task. Would she remain unwavering when faced with opposition? The inkling of fear intertwined with a thrilling notion of courage. This was not just about her classmates. It was her crucible testing everything she had learned. The clock ticked ominously. The time for action had come. Emma steadied herself for the confrontation, knowing the outcome could forge a path toward change or potentially shatter her aspirations. But she could not turn back. Too much had been put on the line already. How could she navigate the tangled web of power and authority while holding on to her resolve? Emma's heart raced as she prepared to face the giants. The moment of reckoning approached, and she stood on the threshold, ready to smash through it or be consumed. Emma stepped into the administration building, her pulse quickening in the pristine yet sterile environment. The sight of polished floors and unyielding walls resonated with an underlying tension, obstacles as formidable as the fears swirling in her mind. She had prepared diligently over the last few days, her notes filled with statistics, testimonials, and reasons why the administration couldn't ignore her peers' plight any longer. But as she approached the conference room, self-doubt clawed at her resolve. What if they dismissed her? What if her carefully crafted arguments crumbled under scrutiny? These questions looped in her mind like a relentless cycle, but each time, she pushed back, harnessing the strength she had forged from her vulnerability. She remembered the way her peers had opened up to her, how they had all confessed their fears and hopes. That shared honesty had fortified her conviction, and now she felt a spark of determination reemerge. Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and pushed the door open. The room was stark, with a long table flanked by a handful of administrators, their expressions a mix of skepticism and indifference. Emma's eyes settled on the head of the table, Mr. Waller, a formidable figure known for his no-nonsense demeanor. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. I'm here to discuss some issues that are affecting my classmates significantly and propose solutions we can work on collaboratively. As she proceeded with her presentation, Emma felt an internal shift. The meticulous notes transformed into a narrative flowing from her heart. She shared stories of her peers, of their frustrations, dreams, and the real stakes involved. The emotional weight in her tone seemed to break through the facade of professionalism in the room. Yet, just as the initial responses were favorable, a voice cut through her momentum. Emma, while your intentions are admirable, you must understand the constraints we operate under. Changes like the ones you're suggesting are not easily made. Mr. Waller leaned back, arms crossed, and the atmosphere thickened with tension. Emma felt the ground shift beneath her confidence. Was this where her journey ended? Her mind raced for a rebuttal, for some powerful counterpoint, but a flash of clarity halted her. She reminded herself of the vulnerability she had embraced earlier. Instead of becoming defensive, she chose honesty. I understand constraints exist, but the reality is that each of us is dealing with this issue on a daily basis. If we can't find a way to take action, we risk losing hope. It might be uncomfortable to consider change, but isn't it also a disservice to ignore the need for it? Her words hung in the air, a challenge that her own heart resonated with. The silence that followed was palpable, each administrator absorbing her plea, weighing the truth of it. This was her moment, a decisive instance that demanded not just bravery but authenticity. She could sense the shift in the room, a flicker of recognition emerging in the eyes of her audience. But just as she felt the tide turning, another administrator chimed in, pushing back against her. Emma, we appreciate your perspective. However, what you're suggesting would require significant resources and impact other programs. Why should we prioritize this? Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. This was the defining moment. Was she going to retreat from the rising conflict? Emma tightened her grip on the table, steadied her breath, and stood firm. Because we are more than a list of programs. We are individuals who want to see a change. It's not just about resources, it's about values. Are we prioritizing our students' well-being as we should? Every decision we make ultimately affects them. With that, a ripple of tension surged through the room. Emma could see some heads nodding, uncertainty giving way to consideration. Yet, the challenge morphed again, this time into a personal one. How deep did her commitment to this cause run? Would she maintain her stance despite potential fallout? As the discussion moved into contentious territory, Emma felt the ground potentially shifting beneath her. She could sense both the precariousness of this moment and the possibility of real change. But as voices escalated in disagreement, Emma remained focused, a quiet fire igniting within her. This was not just about the administration's response but about her own evolution. Would she be able to stand her ground in the face of opposition and emerge stronger for it? As she took a breath, preparing for the next challenge coming her way, Emma realized one truth remained. The outcome would define not just her path forward, but also a crucial aspect of her character. And with that realization, she wondered, was she truly ready to confront the real giants of her life? Not just these figures across the table, but the fears that had governed her for so long? Emma listened as the arguments intensified, an unwanted crescendo of voices punctuating the gravity of the moment. The initial support felt like a lighthouse's beacon, but it underscored how easily the tide could shift. The opposing views echoed within her, challenging her conviction. She could feel the weight of expectation, hers and everyone else's, pressing on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Instead of succumbing to doubt, Emma honed in on the observations swirling in her mind, contemplating the fear that was no longer just external but personal. If she faltered here, it might reflect her fear of being seen as weak or, worse, unworthy of advocating for her peers. Emma, I'll remind you that change isn't just the embodiment of good intentions. Mr. Waller continued, folding his arms tighter. We have a responsibility to the entire student body, and this could set a precedent. Are you prepared for the ramifications if it doesn't work? An electric tension hung thick in the air, yet she sensed an unexpected opportunity within his challenge, a chance to elevate her argument further while demonstrating her readiness to face consequences. Precisely, Mr. Waller, she replied, her voice unwavering. We should weigh these decisions against the outcomes for individuals and not just the broader institution. If we truly value our mission, we must be open to recalibrating our approach when necessary. A failure to address urgent needs could destroy trust, and that is a risk no one should be willing to take. The room fell silent again, her assertive articulation reverberating off the cold walls around them. She could almost see dim rays of understanding illuminating the administrators' faces. It was contrary to her earlier self, who had often silenced her own voice, fearing disagreement. With the pointed exchange still igniting her thoughts, Emma shifted strategies. Instead of just combating each criticism, she began weaving a narrative of collective responsibility. She touched upon the stories of her classmates, their lives, aspirations, and trials which she had initially shared. More than factual statistics, emotional truths held immense sway. Each day, we build a community, she implored, her voice rising with an infectious passion. This isn't merely an academic institution. It's a collective of dreams and hope. We owe it to our students to listen and adapt. It's not about scapegoating resources. It's about reallocating our priorities. Emma watched as some faces softened, uncertainty morphing into contemplation. Even those initially resistant appeared to grapple with her conviction. This dialogue was no longer a battle. It had transformed into a catalyst for introspection even for her. Yet, amidst the developing momentum, a flicker of fear ignited in her mind. What if she had overstepped? Would there be severe repercussions for going head-to-head with authority? Those familiar self-doubts crept back, clawing at her core. Had she pushed too hard? Or was this exactly what she had needed to confront? As discussions began to branch into different territories, Emma experienced a profound realization this wasn't simply about altering policies. It was a personal journey of maturation. Bridging the divide between herself and the formidable figures opposite her was critical not just for this cause but for her own evolution into someone capable of leading change. With one more decisive inhale, she prepared to reclaim the floor, ready to refine her strategy further. She sensed that within the chaos lay the seeds of transformation, not just for policy but for her character, too. The clock was ticking down as debate simmered, and Emma had a choice to make. Would she retreat to safety, tucking away her newfound courage, or would she plunge deeper into this discomfort, harnessing the wisdom of that journey? Before she could indulge in contemplation, a voice cut through her internal struggle. What you're suggesting is brave, Emma, but what's your fallback plan if they reject your ideas? As the question hung in the air, Emma felt a sudden tightening in her stomach. Was she prepared for failure? Would she have the strength to confront discouragement not just on this stage, but throughout her life? With determination flickering back to life inside her, she realized one truth. The path she had embarked on necessitated resilience, no matter the outcome. The giants were closing in both outside and within, and as the conversation shifted yet again, Emma found her resolve igniting a fierce clarity within. This moment wasn't merely about winning an argument. It was the first step toward confronting the deeper giants that haunted her existence. What awaited her on the other side of this confrontation could redefine everything. Would she rise, or would she fall? Only time would tell if her pursuit of authenticity could withstand the inevitable storms ahead. Emma's mind churned rapidly as the room filled with whispered discussions triggered by her previous remarks. She felt as if both sides were slowly converging, and yet she stood at the precipice of indecision. The question asked earlier reverberated in her thoughts, stirring both fear and clarity. What if her ideas were rejected? What if her vulnerability to the giants she faced led her to failure? As anticipation built, she focused inward. Regaining her composure was essential. This was not just about debating policies but embodying strength, authenticity, and the ability to confront deep-seated fears. She had transformed the conversation into a personal evolution, but now she needed to solidify her footing. With newfound urgency, she scanned the faces before her. Some remained doubtful while others exhibited curiosity. Emma decided she needed to elevate the discussion yet again. This was not an abstract battle over policies, it was about real people and their struggles. While we grapple with these complexities, she began, her voice steady and resonant, let us not forget the voices of those we represent. I can share my own experience, and I know my peers will back me up, people driven by fear, anxiety, and hope. They're counting on us to advocate for real change, not merely to follow traditional protocols that don't serve them. She felt heat flush through her as she spoke, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Every word was a thread, weaving together the tapestry of their collective experiences. This was empowerment, and she was at its helm. For so long, I allowed my own voice to remain small. She inhaled, acknowledging the vulnerability in her admission, believing that conformity was protection. But what I realized recently is that true strength lies not in silence but in speaking your truth. Emma noticed nods and murmurs around her. She could feel a shift occurring. Rather than being an adversary to be defeated, she had become a catalyst for collaboration. Let us turn this moment into our opportunity, she urged, taking a step closer to the table where the administrators sat. No single approach is perfect, but I believe in our capacity to learn from each other and adapt our systems in ways that honor the stories of those we're meant to serve. The question lingered, though, the ghost of what if gnawing away at her. What if her peers and mentors still disapproved? The thought sent a pang of doubt. Yet, instead of retreating, she found a surge of strength rising from the vulnerability she had displayed, realizing that resilience sprang from honesty. This was her battle not just with the governing board but within her own spirit, one that questioned her worthiness. She was no longer a faceless advocate. She had embraced her identity. The atmosphere crackled as the debate shifted again. Administrators leaned in, some appearing more receptive. This juxtaposition energized her, pushing her to confront her internal antagonists. The question remained, what would her fallback be? It wasn't merely about securing approval but building a foundation of honesty as a fallback strategy. Would rejection become a stepping stone, or would it unravel her? In this decisive moment, the anxiety inside her blurred with clarity. The realization washed over her. Fear must coexist with courage to pave a way forward. Failures could yield lessons, and successes could solidify change. Resilience was a choice she could embody now and into her future. Strength was not about avoidance but the acceptance of potential failures as part of her journey. She was on the brink of something transformative, not just for her peers, but for herself. Yet another voice interrupted her thoughts, asking pointedly, and if those lessons are not enough, what measures will you take to ensure your vision isn't lost in bureaucracy? Emma's heart raced as the challenge hung in the air. Confronting that question meant unveiling the ultimate test of her resolve. How would she navigate through both the chaos of external expectations and her own internal limitations? The moment of truth loomed ever closer, and Emma could feel its weight coupled with the spark of anticipation. Would she rise to meet this challenge head-on, or would she falter beneath the pressure? The stakes were higher than ever, but she felt ready to discover just how powerful her honest voice could be. Emma inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the question in the air. It was a challenge, stark and unyielding, tearing through the cautious optimism she had built. She stood at a crossroads. The choice between maintaining her bold declaration or retreating to a safer, more comfortable silence. But this was her moment, not just to proclaim her vision but to solidify her commitment to it. "Thank you for that question," she replied, her voice ringing with unexpected steadiness. "What I propose doesn't require absolute certainty. It demands action, experimentation, and a willingness to embrace the unconventional." The truth of her words seemed to lift her, as though stepping off a cliff with the knowledge that she would find her wings mid-descent. A murmur of interest rippled through the room, punctuated by raised eyebrows and thoughtful expressions. Emma was recounting not only her hopes but the grit required to navigate the obstacles ahead. "We won't transform the bureaucracy overnight. It'll take iterations, discussions, and even setbacks. But what I envision is a culture where our failures are building blocks, not barriers." Engendering a system of accountability and continuous dialogue could bring about the change she yearned for. Each idea fought against the weight of tradition that sought to stifle them. Hear us the truth. Every innovative solution ever derived emerged through questioning what was deemed traditional. If we're to uphold our mission and voice, we must prioritize adaptability and collective wisdom. Emma felt herself transforming as she spoke duality between the nervous, retreating girl she once was and this new incarnation of herself, undaunted by criticism. But as invigorating as the moment felt, she was also starkly aware of the risks. How would those in power react to this paradigm shift? A young administrator in the front row, who had remained silent during the previous discussions, raised her hand. But Emma, how do you handle dissent? What happens when someone outright rejects an approach? How will we manage that conflict? The challenge was clear. This was the fundamental barrier she had to address. Disagreement was inevitable. Conflict isn't an enemy. It's a necessary part of collaboration, she countered, feeling a fire steady behind her words. Our differences can illuminate uncharted territories. If we frame dissent as a conversation rather than a confrontation, we can cultivate a space where every voice feels heard. There was tension and electric silence as murmurs faded, and Emma's challenge hung around her neck like a heavy necklace. This was a defining moment, but rather than shrinking from it, she embraced the discomfort. She wanted to propel her colleagues toward resilience, inviting them to engage in courageous conversations without fearing judgment. As her confidence simmered with steady urgency, she realized that her enhancement was not simply in her ability to challenge. It lay in her capacity to instill courage in others. A wave of clarity washed over her. This was about so much more than her vision. It was about igniting a shift, presenting each individual with the power of their own voice amidst dissent. But the specter of uncertainty resumed its haunting presence. What if her enthusiasm sparked skepticism instead of trust? What if her earnestness was misaligned with their expectations, leading to a perceived failure? Suddenly, a voice broke through. And if listening to all these voices means we lose our direction, aren't boundaries important? It was another ally she thought would support her, but now found herself questioning everything she stood for. As the confrontation intensified, Emma felt her resolve tremble for a moment. Would she stand firm, insistent on her path illuminated by vulnerability and honesty, or swayed into conformity by the established norms merely to maintain control? The pendulum of her confidence swung wildly. The walls of the room felt close, and she clenched her fists, summoning her core as Elise. Her mentor's admonition echoed in her head. Strength lies in not simply holding ground but in understanding the ground upon which you stand. Your beliefs matter. Your willingness to expand them matters more. With sudden clarity and an invigorating rush, Emma knew she had to proceed authentically. How well had she learned to negotiate the shadows of doubt? As she looked into the sea of skeptical faces, her determination solidified. My vision isn't about rigid pathways. It's about navigation, she proclaimed, determination burning brighter. And navigation thrives on exploring tides and currents, adjusting sail to reach our horizon. Will you join me? But as her words left her lips, uncertainty began to pendulum swing again, the fear-laden silence thick in the air. Would her commitment be met with rejection, or could it instead inspire a collective evolution? Emma stood at a crossroads, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The moment of truth hovered close, an impending challenge she felt unworthy of but determined to confront. Would she encompass this moment as her defining breakthrough or allow it to succumb to the weight of bureaucracy? She breathed in, preparing for whatever came next. Emma felt the heavy silence settle like a thick fog around her, enveloping her sudden resolve. She had made her stand. Now, she braced for the echoes of her own words. Although a flicker of enthusiasm ignited within her, the undercurrents of doubt tugged at her mind, feeding her anxieties. The heat of confrontation brewed on the periphery, coupled with the potent possibility of support or dismissal. The scattering of uncertain looks from her peers shifted her focus. Each face seemed to wrestle with a variety of emotions: curiosity, skepticism, confusion. She had crossed a line, stepping from the realm of mere suggestion into the territory of expectation. The whirlwind of thoughts in her mind echoed the internal conflict she desperately tried to manage. Was she pushing too hard? Had she lost them before they'd even begun? Your vision is admirable, Emma. Someone finally spoke, breaking the thick silence. The voice belonged to Blake, a senior manager with a reputation for sharp criticism. But how can we trust that a free-floating process won't lead us into chaos? Your ideas might not create the stability we're looking for. Each word landed with calculated precision. Emma's mind raced. Trust was foundational in her proposal, yet she had inadvertently hit a nerve seated in their distinction between structure and freedom. She sensed that Blake's comment was not just a rebuttal. It was a challenge that demanded a meticulously crafted response, one that could validate her perspective and offer reassurance. Trust, she started, collecting her thoughts to avoid the tremor in her voice. Trust is fostered through transparency, shared intentions, and mutual respect. If we engage in open dialogues, allowing each voice to resonate without fear of consequence, we can neutralize the chaos you're concerned about. Rigid paths can stifle innovation. I believe we must navigate together. With each assertion, Emma felt the earlier concerns fade slightly as a sense of purpose reclaimed its place within her. But how do we measure success when everyone is encouraged to share differing opinions? Another voice interjected: Jenna, a colleague she had always admired for her prudent approach to problem-solving. Without measurable goals, how can we be held accountable if things go awry? There it was again, the echo of doubt. Emma took a breath and focused on Jenna's question. It was a valid point, one that she herself had pondered deeply. Accountability doesn't have to come from rigid structures. What if we create evolving metrics that adjust as our processes develop? She proposed, each word a stepping stone into her vision. We could establish collaborative benchmarks that allow us to assess not only outcomes but also our willingness to adapt. A culture of learning where mistakes are seen as necessary learning points, not failures. As she spoke, awareness washed over her. This dialogue wasn't just about defending her vision. It was about embracing the uncomfortable questions that would ultimately reshape their approach. Her ability to confront these hurdles and hers alone would propel them all beyond ancient paradigms. Each engagement awakened deeper layers of courage in her. Emma glanced around, taking in the complexity of emotions on their faces. Some seemed intrigued while others still wore their skepticism like armor. In that moment, she realized she could no longer sidestep her anxiety about rejection. She had to confront it head-on. This was more than professional ambition. This was also deeply personal. As Blake sat quietly, she felt an invitation for dialogue linger. She shifted focus, tapping into her mentor's teachings about emotional intelligence. Let us take it one step further, Emma suggested, her voice steady. How about we hold a series of sessions where we can express our thoughts in a safe environment? Developing our approach together will help us all feel more secure in this journey. She saw a wave of understanding ripple among her peers. The tension, though still present, felt less stifling, as if they were collectively exhaling after a tense breath-holding. But even as hope surged, a dark cloud of uncertainty resurfaced. How long would that wave of understanding last? Would they genuinely be able to challenge the status quo they had grown accustomed to? Emma was balancing on a tightrope of potential and peril, ready to navigate where this dialogue would lead. Would the tides of resistance shift to a current of collaboration, or would her efforts capsize in the uncharted waters of dissent? The answer lingered unspoken, tantalizingly close but veiled in possibility. With her heart racing, she prepared for whatever discussions lay ahead, the threshold of transformation leading her into a space marked by anticipation of change. The stakes were high, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her commitment leading her deeper than the mere surface of conversation. Would she withstand the coming storm to uncover her team's strength and resolve? Emma had never felt this alive, standing firmly at the edge of opportunity. But even as she opened the floor to feedback, before she could take a proper breath, a sudden realization struck her, something crucial that she hadn't fully considered. With a surge of urgency, She wondered if she truly understood the depths of their dissent or if she was merely tiptoeing around the core issues. The time had come to face not only her vision but the underlying truths of their fears. What would that revelation demand from her, and at what cost? Emma stood on the cusp of discovery, ready to ignite the momentum towards transformation, where doubts were both her adversaries and her guides. Emma exited the administration building, feeling an electrifying mixture of triumph and trepidation wash over her. She had faced the giant's doubt, authority, and the uncertainty of her peers and emerged almost intact. Yes, she had articulated a vision of change, yet beneath the confidence lay a vulnerability that resonated deep within her. The discussions that unfolded had transformed her more than any academic class ever could. She reflected on the quotes she had shared, and the moments when her heart raced as she spoke her truth. That authenticity had set her apart and lent grace to her voice. The girl who had once doubted herself was now an advocate for change. She had not just defended an idea. She had led a movement, however small, toward honesty, respect, and collaboration. Others had begun to see her as more than a waitress turned student. She was a formidable force for change. Days turned into weeks filled with feedback sessions where Emma's vision steadily garnered support. The administrators had slowly transformed from wary skeptics into engaged collaborators. Her peers stepped out of their silos, forging connections through shared experiences. Every conversation opened new doors, creating pathways for innovations that spoke to individual needs while strengthening the rhythm of their collective aspirations. During one heartfelt meeting, Jenna, the colleague who had challenged Emma's initial thoughts, offered her support. "Emma, I never expected to feel this much encouragement from your perspective," she admitted, her voice laced with sincerity. "You've shown me that we can advocate for change without chaos, by simply fostering unity and understanding." There, in that acknowledgement, Emma discovered something unexpected: validation. Her growth was not just born of her own courage. It was the cultivation of trust among peers that lent the movement strength. In a decisive meeting with the administration, Emma felt her heart race anew as she presented their cohesive plan. "We acknowledge that every voice carries weight," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "If we're to redefine our approach in ways that truly impact our students, we must collaborate on the process, not merely on policies. Our goal isn't to disrupt, but to enhance the experience for everyone." The room was quiet but charged. Eyes focused on Emma, witnessing the transformation of the single mother into a figure poised for advocacy. Mr. Waller spoke, his expression one of thoughtful consideration rather than dismissal. "Your thoughts have merit, Emma," he acknowledged. "Perhaps it's time to integrate new frameworks. Change doesn't happen without insight from those directly impacted. Let us explore how to implement a pilot program for these ideas." As exhilarating as that moment felt, Emma knew the journey ahead was complicated. Change wouldn't materialize overnight. Emma wrestled with that knowledge but found solace in how far she had come. By inviting others into the conversation, she broke down barriers and fortified connections. Finally, the administration adopted a pilot program offering support and resources based on open feedback from students. Emma felt a surge of pride knowing they had paved the way for individuals to amplify their voices in a structured manner. Through her tenacity, integrity, and vulnerability, she had forged pathways for herself and her classmates. Moreover, she passed on this empowerment ethos to Jake, who had become inspired by his mother's progression. "I see how hard you've worked, Mom. You're not just a waitress anymore," he exclaimed. "You're a warrior." His proud gaze solidified her realization that her efforts were not in vain. They would echo through generations. Weeks later, Emma stood in front of the diner's window, taking in the shimmering sun and bustling street as she prepared to serve customers. The transitions she facilitated were not merely for her education but for her son and their shared future. Her heart swelled as she reflected on the transformations, both personal and systemic, she had achieved through resilience and honesty. The only conflict that lingered was the question of whether she would continue the momentum. But this, she realized, was merely a choice. Emma Sullivan, a woman who had battled both external giants and the fears within, stood at a threshold. She had proven her capacity to enact change and elevate voices around her. Now she held the keys to her destiny. This was her moment to thrive, to showcase how deeply she had transformed. Stepping into her radiant future, Emma knew the possibilities were boundless. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support our journey. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. We crave your insights. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. What a profound message on perseverance. You need to subscribe now and witness the power of personal overcoming stories. Don't wait even one more second to share.